Hey everybody, this is Ripken Reports. Nick, I want to ask you because volunteer teams have become really popular nowadays. Sending volunteers short term, midterm, long term, but sending volunteers overseas, it's a really popular thing that churches do nowadays. Now, I want to ask you, in your 37 years overseas, did you ever get a volunteer somewhere that you looked at and you thought, this person is going to cause problems, or this person is going to be an issue being a volunteer here?
Well, I grew up with I don't know exactly the name of the show. It may be this, but Andy of Mayberry with Opie and all that.
The Andy Griffith
Some of
Show.
you
Yeah.
you'll have to go back and look it up, but they had a Barney Fife, a deputy sheriff on that as my daddy would say, could mess up a free lunch. And I thought I had received that volunteer, but but the thing is, receiving that volunteer in an open country, responsive country, a relatively safe country, and receiving that same person in Mogadishu is
That's right.
a different basket of apples. One place they might be ineffective, the other place can get you shot.
That's
And
true.
so my wife called me on a shortwave radio and said, "You don't know this, but you've got a volunteer coming in tomorrow." And I said, "Who is he, or who is this person?" She said, "Well, I don't know exactly how to describe him, but he was supposed to
Oh
come
no.
out and work with one of the mission agencies here in Nairobi for 3 months, and he showed up, and he was just by his appearance and the way that he talked, he was 6'5", weighed 350 pounds. If you
Wow.
think I sound country, multiply it by 20 times.
Oh
He's
no.
from Appalachia, in the deep
Oh, I can
hollers
imagine.
of Appalachia. You could cut his language, his accent with with a knife, and he just looks like somebody that couldn't put his own shoes on for the morning, in the morning. And so when he showed up in Nairobi, they didn't tell him the truth. They told him that volunteer request had been canceled.
Oh no.
And he said, they said, so you're just going to have to change your ticket and go home. And he said, I have gotten off of work for 3 months and I am here to stay. And I know that Jesus has sent
Wow.
me out here to work. And this guy who had written a request said, well, I'll get you a hotel room until we can figure out what you can do with yourself. He said, no, sir, I've never been in this country before. I'm not staying in a strange hotel. The guy said, where are you going to stay? He said, I'm sleeping on your couch. And so what they did, they convinced my sweet wife to adopt this guy and send him in to me. And when I saw him get off of
No.
this small 6-seater airplane and come through, there's no customs or immigration in the Mogadishu airport, but I just looked at him, and he's going around and he's just saying howdy to everybody
Oh,
and saying, my name is Bum. What's your name and where you're from? And I'm going, my goodness, I wonder if I just act like I don't show up. And I thought, I have no clue what I am going to do with this guy from the hills and hollers of his state.
oh
And I
no.
brought him in, and he probably turned out to be one of the most best friends I've got in the world now, and
Really?
one of the most effective workers. And if there ever was a one gifted person, that was him. I remember the day things had gone so badly. We'd lost kids at
Mm.
medical clinics. We'd had watched children die of starvation that if we'd gotten there a day earlier, they need not die. And things were going so bad, and the Civil War just seemed to be getting worse. And they were hunting down Christians and slaughtering them and throwing their bodies away. And one day we were to go out and meet the convoy. I don't remember whether it was Egyptian our U.S. Army or whatever, you had to meet them really early in the morning, and our nurses wouldn't get out of bed. They said, this place is useless. Nothing we will ever do will change this place. And they wouldn't get up. They wouldn't put their clothes on. They wouldn't eat breakfast. And Bum goes into their, pulls the sheet aside that is the door to their bedroom, walks in their bedroom in his boxers.
Oh, no.
All 350 pounds, 6'5" of him, walks in their bedroom, and he says, "We don't know whether we're going to live or die.
Mm.
But what we do know is that Jesus has brought us here to help those who have nothing, and those, if we don't show up, will die." He said, "Now you
Praise
get
the Lord.
up and put your clothes on, and breakfast will be ready for you. We're going to go and get in the trucks and go to the village and go to the feeding site, and you're going to be happy and you're going to enjoy it. So get out of bed, put your clothes on, and let's go to work."
Amazing.
And I thought, my goodness, I didn't know whether I would have thought of doing it and doing it that way, and especially doing it in my boxers, you know.
I wouldn't
And
expect you to do that.
so what I had Bum doing, we had these 10 feeding sites where we're feeding 5,000 people a day. Now understand, the military would put razor wire out for a quarter of a mile, and by 4 o'clock in the morning, there is over a half a mile to a mile of people standing in line ready to come in that razor wire, where they would pass a little plastic hut with 3 or 4 ladies sitting behind tables and some men there with big bags of dirty wheat and horse corn.
Mm.
And all we had to give those people, given to us by the U.S. government in order to subsidize farmers in America, they bought their dirty, unprocessed wheat and their horse corn, and the Somalis would come in at 4:30 in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning with a plastic bag, and whatever we had, whether it was the dirty wheat or the horse corn, they got 2 kilograms, 5 pounds of dirty wheat or horse corn to feed their family.
Wow.
I was so ashamed.
I would be too.
But it was either give that or nothing.
Yeah.
Now, in those days, the U.S. military and the coalition forces from all over the world, 30-some thousand of them had come in. Things were going off the wire. They were going after the biggest warlord. So the biggest warlord was going after Westerners, and so things were bad. And so everywhere we went, we were surrounded by military. So on these feeding sites, we'd get there. We don't know, but there'd be Egyptians surrounding us, military personnel, Nepalese, Pakistanis, from all over the world. It could be Australian. That day, we just happened to draw the U.S. Army, and they were surrounding that feeding site. If we got there and the food was there and the people were there, and by 4:30, if the military wasn't there, we got in our trucks and left.
Oh man.
It was just that dangerous.
Yeah.
And so it is 110, 120 degrees mid-morning, and here they are coming through that razor wire. They're lined up. They've been lined up way before daylight, and they've got their plastic bags, and 3 at a time are coming in, standing before the table and getting their 5 pounds of dirty wheat, and then they're having to go out, and next 3 come in and get their 5 pounds of dirty wheat, and they go out. And this old lady came in and got her 5 pounds of dirty wheat, and she'd had enough. And Bum's job was to coordinate, making sure that the food got there, the Somali workers got there, the tables were set up, the chairs were set up, that the razor wire was intact, and make sure that the military were there before they started allowing the crowd to come into that contained area. And he was sort of the manager of that site, standing on a raised area of dirt in the middle of these 5,000 people surrounded by the U.S. military. and he's 350 pounds.
Mm.
The sweat's just pouring off of him. He generally lost about 20 pounds a day and would rehydrate all through the night. And he's just standing there. And this old lady has had enough.
Oh
She's
no.
tired of this dirty wheat. And she breaks the rules. And she walks around the razor wire as she is exiting that feeding site. And instead of going off of that feeding site, she goes around the end of the razor wire and she comes inside of that compound where only the military and us as personnel are to be. And I'm standing over in the shade by one of the U.S. Army guys, and all of a sudden I hear somebody gasp, and I look, and that old lady had walked up to Bum. Now,
Oh, no.
if his neck is about this big around, her neck is about this big around. He weighs 350 pounds. She probably weighs 80 pounds.
Wow. Mm.
I mean, as my grandma used to say to me, boy, you don't have enough fat on your body to grease a pan. That was certainly true about this old lady.
Oh, man.
But she walks up to him and she begins to curse Bum in the Somali language. And of course, he doesn't understand a word.
Sure.
But you could see the military people tensing up. You could see the Somali guys who are guards of the compound tensing up and looking at each other. So I know what she's saying is really inflammatory. And she just curses him. And then she realizes she lacks the power of communication. So she sets that dirty bag of wheat on the ground. And she gets a double handful of it, and she stands back up, and she throws it in Bum's face.
No.
And it sticks all over his sweaty face.
No.
It goes in his hair. It's in his ears. It's stuck to his lips. It's up his nostrils. It's all over his body. And you could just hear the women and the men gasping. And all I could hear were the guns cocking of the U.S. Army.
Oh, my gosh. So tense.
And I just knew he could just reach out and take that big old hand of his and just snap hers like a chicken neck. And I just thought, what in the world is he going to do? What is he going to say? How is this going to end? And he looks at her and he starts to smile. And he's got this big grin on his face. And he starts to sing to her one of the old famous Elvis Presley songs that I grew up with as a kid. And he looked at her and sang to her, "You ain't nothing but a hound dog, yapping all the time. You never, and you ain't no friend of mine." There's another sentence in there. And he just sang to her, and Somalis began to clap. This old lady stomped off in aggravation. The U.S. Army is laying over the hoods of their Humvees and their Jeeps, and their weapons have been laid aside. They are laughing so hard that tears are coming down their face. And I don't know that I had ever seen in my life any more, much more act of love as I did at that moment.
Wow.
As when that man covered in sweat with wheat hanging over his face like ornaments on a Christmas tree. And he looks at that lady that he could have knocked over with a flip of his finger. And he sang a well-known, back then, Elvis Presley song, "You ain't nothing but a hound dog, yapping all the time." Well, folks, this is Nik Ripken, and I sure am enjoying the journey.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Ripken Reports. If you want to stay connected to our ministry, you can go to www.nikripken.com, or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X.